we've rehearsed together, but I'm indebted to Jennifer for an enormous amount of work, and she will be comparing this evening's event. I met her in May 2019 at the Changing Worlds Literature Festival in Nottingham, where Amir Darwish was also present, who's a friend from long standing. She was organising an event called Towards an Open Land on the front line together. And it struck me how completely the values of Exiled Writers Ink and Pale World Press walked together. And I said, if they wanted something like an anthology, to let me know. As well as being the founding director of Exiled Writers Ink, Jennifer Lange has edited 4 anthologies of exiled literature. She holds a doctorate in cultural memory from SOAS, University of London, and is a SOAS Research Associate. Her published poetry collection, The Search, is forthcoming. So it gives me enormous pleasure to hand over to you, Jennifer. Thank you very much. Right, now you need to unmute, that's perfect.
Thank you very much, Camilla, for that generous introduction. And welcome everybody to this wonderful celebration of our 20th anniversary, which we're marking with our book, Resistance. I'd like to thank all the members of the Exiled Ink editorial committee for their commitment and hard work, not forgetting the 2 guest editors, Miriam Frank and Edin Suljic. And of course, I also express my gratitude to Camilla for her dedication to the project. So the book, here it is as I said, entitled Resistance. And in fact, Exiled Writers Ink was born of resistance. At a time when refugees were frequently stigmatized, Exiled Writers Ink was set on defying that narrative to disrupt existing stereotypes. With a passion for justice, we enabled refugee writers' voices to be heard so that insights could be gained into the complexity of their subjectivity and experiences. In fact, this book comprises 20 chapters, and I'm sure you can guess why. It's one for each year between 2000, when we were formally established, and now 2020. So each chapter represents an aspect of our awareness raising and literary activism work in the context of individual and collective resistance against the abuse of human rights, whatever form it takes. From Kosovo to Black Lives Matter, via chapters on Afghanistan, the Western Sahara, censorship, violence against women, the Uyghurs, Bosnia, just to name a few. And it's really important to note that while we have linked our projects to specific years, in so many instances, the specific human rights abuse and/or the conflict has a very long history and endures, it carries on, unfortunately. So we're going to hear from some of the editors and writers, and indeed the main focus of the book and tonight must be on the voices of the exiled writers themselves, with those we feature having almost all been involved with Exiled Writers Ink over the years at one time or another. Of course, we have not been able to include all our literary activism work in the book, nor all the exiled literary voices of the last 20 years. But those we include range from developing to established writers. Their poetry and prose represent the intersection of the personal and the political. It's a bit cliched, I know, but politics is inextricably linked with the literary work of writers who fled from their countries because of oppression, persecution, war, imprisonment, lack of freedom of speech, and more. And we mustn't forget the abuse of human rights in this country as well. To be an exiled writer is to use writing as a tool to speak out against continuing injustice and abuse in the country of origin. With this courage comes risk, even in exile. Thank you for listening to that. And now we're going to focus on one of our 20 chapters, which is about Syria. And I'll be introducing Amir Darwish in a minute. So in a show of defiance in their call for peace in protest against the war in Syria, the title chosen by the Syrian writers for their Exiled Writers Ink literary activism event was Syrian Writers for Love and Peace in Syria. And I thought that was absolutely amazing at a time when there was so much factionalism and sectarianism, that these writers who had suffered from it had chosen to focus on love and peace in Syria. And in that chapter, we've got poetry by Nada Menzalji, Kholoud Sharaf, Malak Sufi, and Amir Darwish. And we'll hear from Amir in just a moment. I'm sure Amir is much more knowledgeable than I, and indeed he helped me write the introduction to the chapter along with writing contact he recommended. And they made the point they made is that the war in Syria on writers did not start in 2011, but actually in 2000, when the Assad regime took charge of Syria and tried to suffocate the expression of all writers. And therefore, writers in Syria are subject to silence, or if they speak out, of imprisonment, caught between following and supporting the dictatorship or writing covertly and endangering themselves. So what the war added was a higher level of oppression and gagging in the form of arbitrary imprisonment without trial, and in many cases, even summary execution. So as you can imagine, as a result, many writers fled into exile, so that in their work, you've got a mixture of the sensibility of loss of home mixed with the struggle and resistance against the war and the people's suffering. And what is evident from the poetry is that the writers are insistent on their own voices being heard to resist generalized media narratives about refugees and suffering. Exiled poet Amir Darwish is intent on determining his own narrative. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about him, and then it would be lovely to hear from him. Amir Darwish is a Syrian poet and writer of Kurdish origin. Born in Aleppo, he came to Britain as an asylum seeker in 2013. His poetry collections are Don't Forget the Couscous, 2015, and Dear Refugee, 2019, both published by Smokestack. And his memoir is From Aleppo Without Love, 2017. So I hand over to Amir Darwish.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Can everybody hear me? Well, I hope, yes. Just a small correction. I came to Britain in 2003, not 13.
Oh, that's probably a typo.
That's fine. That's okay. At 10 years, it doesn't feel long, and when someone getting exiled. So when Jennifer when I first faced with the atrocities that's happening in Syria, I couldn't write anything at all for a couple of years or more. Then, because the trauma and it has to be processed and it has to be going through many layers before it settles, then a poem came to mind, and I thought, what might be the best thing to respond to the situation that people are dying? My response to that was, we want to live. So I called the poem We Want to Live. On the margin of a forgotten camp, we want to live with pain, with sadness, with agony, with the trauma. We want to live. With or without food, we want to live. With thirst, with enemies or without them, we still want to live. Under a torn tent, leaking rain at night, we want to live. We want to live. At the long queue for clothes, we want to live. With every step we take towards death, we want to live. With every tree we pass, with every pride swallowed, we want to live. With or without our children, we want to live. With or without our parents, we want to live. We want to live because we love life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shamir. And now I'm going to hand over to Esther, who's going to talk briefly about the Uyghur situation, along with the poet, the Uyghur poet, Aziz Isa Elkun. After that, Esther's going to talk about another one of the chapters she edited, which is Out of Europe. And the guest poet there is Bogdan Tiganov. So over to Esther now.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. In November 2012, Exiled Writers Ink dedicated an event held at the Poetry Cafe to unheard Muslim voices from China. It focused on the Uyghur people who come from the autonomous region of Xinjiang. The Uyghurs are mentioned in Chinese records dating back to the 3rd century. Despite a long history of subjugation, it is only in recent years that the plight of the Uyghurs has aroused the attention of Western democracies and world media. However, since 2016, China has detained more than 1 million Uyghur Muslims in what they call educational centers. These centers, which resemble high security jails, use violence and torture to deny and to erase their culture and heritage. It is the writers, now exiled from their homeland, their poems and testimonies, which have become the voices of protest and resistance. I am honored to introduce the poet, writer, and academic Aziz Isa Elkun, who is one of the many Uyghur Muslims living in London, cut off from any contact with their family. He is an activist and outspoken advocate for his people, recognizing and sharing the plight of others who have suffered the horrors of genocide. In his poem, Borders, he says, "I want all humans to be free." Aziz will now comment on his poem and read it, and the abuse and denial of human rights, which was recognized as such by the United Nations Human Rights Panel in 2018. So I hand it over to you, Aziz. Thank you. Can you unmute yourself?
Hello, good evening, everybody. And thank you, Ishtar, introducing me to our family. I'm so privileged and honored to see all writers, poets, artists, all our friends together in this terrible time with the human spirit, with the spirit of resistance against injustice. Yes, I've been living in London more than 20 years. When I was a child, I remember my early memories. I like to read, I like to write. When at even high school, my maths teacher teaches algebra or maths. I was secretly writing poem. And once my teacher was found, why you are writing poem? I said, I like writing poem. I like my language. My language is beautiful. I want to use my talent. Anyway, I passed the university. And the tragedy is now, I cannot use my own language. China attacking not about the ordinary innocent Uyghur Chinese citizen, but also attacking Uyghur poets, artists, academics. The several million, maybe many of you know the tragedy. Yes, we have, I'm hearing about our friend, Dervish, about a poem from Syria. And yes, we hear many tragedy around the world. But whenever I read the spirit, the artistic part, the human side of our friends who has some tragedy, some fate, I feel stronger. And also, there's a lots of talk about the tragedy in Syria, in Myanmar, Rohingya Muslims and Uyghurs as well. And I just feel, and my demands very little, very little. I just want to be able to call to my mother, just want to speak to them, but I can't. I couldn't. I was campaigning on the media, just help me to speak to my mother. I want to know she's alive. And I was very desperate, but year after year, I became stronger. And I firstly discovered this Chinese atrocity, locking the innocent Uyghur people to their newly built concentration camps or internment camps, whatever we call. I realized that was something going terribly wrong. I was telling to the media, revealing the truth. I have many poet friends who disappeared, and I've always feel the injustice. Why we humans? Why we are fighting? We have only one world, and why we create all the borders and fighting for the borders, fighting. Just all the trouble starts with the borders, and one day I was very sad, and I should just express my feeling, because whenever I write a poem in Uyghur, in my mother tongue, in Uyghur, or most of the time I write in Uyghur, and sometimes I write in English. Most of the time also I translate from Uyghur to English. And I feel stronger myself. I feel I'm more connected to the humanity, and I do believe this humanity exists. Uyghur people are not alone. We are part of the human being, part of the civilization, part of the resistance. And I can lead on until now, and I'm stronger now, and I'm very pleased to see all of you. And yes, I have to tell, I'm only child of my parents. And I used to have very lovely father. He is a doctor. He brought me up. Yeah, the hardship during the Cultural Revolution in China. He encouraged me to study, and he died in November 2017. I was very sad. And in March 2019, I missed him. I want to see from the Google Earth how my family home looks like. And I discovered Chinese government flattened my father's tomb. And then I could not bear for many months. And I wrote poem again to my father. And I made a short film documentary. I tried to keep myself with the spirit to fight against the evil regime. And yes, I am, yes, in the media, we are the Uyghur people described or prototyped more like Uyghur Muslims, but it's not correct description. Uyghurs are people. We are also Muslim. We are also human being. We are part of the humanity. There's no religious division among the Uyghur community. We are just Uyghur people, like Uzbek, Kazakh, Turkish, or Kurd. Among them also Muslims, among them also Christians. So I'm just want to give the extra additional reference about Uyghurs' identity. We are Turkish people, just like Uzbek people, just like Turkish people. We speak Uyghur language, which is part of the Altaic Turkic language. And now I'm going to read my poem about borders. Borders. How long is it since you became a source of conflict? We all know well you did not exist before Adam was born. At that time, humans were kind and they knew how to love. So, why did humans create you? Why are they obsessed with you now? There are so many wars because of you, you know. Trump's war of the wall with Mexico, Putin's border war with Ukraine, Xi Jinping's borderland war with the Uyghurs, Erdogan's border war with Syria, Britain's border war with Europe, and so on. So, why do you wage war over borders? No border, no power has the right to take away our God-given rights. We were all born to live free. I want all humans to be free. I want the millions of my fellow Uyghurs set free from China's internment camps. I am ashamed to see caged humans inside your walls. I want to break your cage. I want to break your silence. I want to be free, free like a bird, free like a wild pigeon, to fly freely in the blue sky. Because we all have only one world. No time for war and fighting. Thank you.
Over to you, Esther. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ami. That was really quite something. Thank you. Another chapter in the book is called Out of Europe. In just 14 days, we shall, after 46 years, be leaving the European Union. Representing writers from Europe today is Bogdan Tiganov. Bogdan is a Romanian artist, writer, and gifted musician. Some years ago, I reviewed for Exiled Writers Ink his very first book, The Wooden Tongue Speaks. It is a superb collection of prose and poetic memories of a happy childhood, a childhood which was followed by a life under a restrictive and paranoia-inducing dictatorship. Resistance is the common thread that binds his family history, refusing indoctrination into communist ideology. For Bogdan, independent thinking is a form of resistance. Bogdan views Brexit as a failure of independent thinking. He will say a few words about the poem before reading it. His poem is called, actually, The 1st of January 2021. Over to you, Bogdan.
Thank you very much, Esther, and good evening, everyone. Yes, so Brexit is obviously a very big topic that we're all incredibly familiar with, over familiar, I would say. So there was a lot that I could have written about, but personally for me, it kind of boiled down to multiculturalism and specifically my experiences as a child and growing up and kind of experiencing Britain in that respect and how that's kind of faded away. It's been a little bit not overturned, but kind of overshadowed by various propaganda and right-wing thinking and ideology over time, which I think led up to Brexit. And yeah, so my poem, the 1st of January 2021. My first good friend was Turkish. We understood each other through play. And he gave me a watch that played the tune, but I lost it at the swimming pool. My second good friend was British. He had a haircut like Damon Albarn. And soon I spoke the language of Shakespeare, Keats, and Wilde. My best friend was Libyan. We loved each other's cultures, Christian and Muslim brothers, sharing God's food. I don't recognize this country now, this hatred, this apathetic nationalism, this resigned fear. It's lacking in sophistication. This is not the Great Britain I loved, of culture and tradition, and taste and class. We're being consumed by Americanization, big business, selfishness, dumbed down rubbish, swallowed it whole with a Diet Coke. Seduced by the good life, we turned our backs on culture and embraced propaganda. So here we are, alone. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Bogdan. And I now hand you back to Jennifer.
Thank you, Esther. It's a very complex chain of communication. Okay, and now we're going to hear from Danielle Misano, who is going to introduce her guest, Denise Vargas Bolaños. So over to you, Danielle.
Thank you, Jennifer. So since its inception, Exiled Writers Ink has shown support for the exiled writers of Latin America. The chapter in this collection titled Exiled Latin American Voices features the poetry of several members of the Spanish and Latin American Poets and Writers, or SLAP Collective, and of Las Juanas, the Hispano-American women writers on memory group based in London. Both groups have been featured in powerful Exiled Writers Ink events over the years, focused on literature and music, with performers originating from Peru, Chile, Argentina, Bolivia, and Mexico. A deep history of colonialism and political upheaval in many Latin American countries has resulted in years of violence, human rights abuses, and exile. The suffering and loss of country, home, family, and friends, along with personal experiences of the terror of torture and imprisonment, are shared with others through poetry as a means of resistance, a way to remember, to heal, and to warn against future injustice. Tonight, Denise Vargas Bolaños will read for us her poem, The Dictator's House, featured in this chapter. It is a poem about an infamous general who ruled Bolivia as a ruthless dictator in the 1970s and returned in 1997 to become the democratically elected president of Bolivia. Denise is a Bolivian poet and writer. She is a member of both the feminist literary collective Las Juanas and the SLAP collective. She was also part of the Invisible Presence project. Her poems and short stories have appeared in anthologies and magazines such as Unraveling Memories and A New Voice, Emerging British Latino Writers. Welcome and thank you, Denise.
Thank you very much, Danielle, for the introduction, and I'm very honored to be part of this celebration of the 20th anniversary of Exiled Ink, and also that my poem is included in that amazing book that I just saw. Well,
you're saying all the right things, Denise.
I will be sharing a short poem with you, but first I would like to give you a bit of context of what was happening in my country at that time. So Danielle mentioned something about this. So as she mentioned, I'm from Bolivia, and like many other countries in South America, my country went through a terrible period of authoritarian military regimes. So this was throughout the 60s and the 80s. As a consequence of that, many people were killed, disappeared and tortured, and many others were exiled too. So an infamous general, as Danielle mentioned, who ruled, I don't want to say his name, he was a ruthless dictator in the 1970s, and then he became as a democratically elected president of Bolivia. And at that time, I was part of a political movement which consisted of people from different ages and backgrounds, and also relatives and survivors from the different regimes. So as part of this movement, and we took part, organized and promoted demonstration, marches, and many other kind of protests. The Dictator's House. I remember the steep road leading to Avenida del Libertador, uneven cobblestones. I remember the deserted bridge. A warm white glow pierced the night icy sky. I remember El Rio Choqueyapu. The burble of the stream carried silenced dirt. I remember hands clutching the bag, cans of red paint inside, like bells, announced my steps. I remember Virgen de Lourdes Grotto, illuminated by green traffic lights. Incandescent shadows, the three of us. I remember long seconds of rattle in unison. Red letters hissed, at the guilty wall. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danielle and Denise. That's a beautiful poem, and it sort of emphasizes the dangers and the courage needed to take action against injustice. And now we're going to hear from Catherine Davidson, who is going to introduce Shirin Razavian. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Jennifer. So great to be here this evening and to see so many familiar faces and new faces, and to readers tonight. When writers leave their homes, they don't forget those who've been left behind. And Exiled Writers Ink has regularly hosted what we call agit, where we make connections with writers who are trapped in conflict zones to reach our hands behind the prison walls and to lift poems out of them. These events combine creative expression with activism, often in collaboration with other organizations, including English Pen and Amnesty, along with human rights advocates. Recent years, co-host human rights Simone, who I hear. She helped organize things on behalf of poets in prison in the Arab world, and that work is featured in chapter 12 of the book. Right now, Simone is running a social media campaign on behalf of imprisoned writers in Iran called Give Them a Voice, and it culminates on the 21st of December, so everyone here tonight can participate in an agit-led event if they want, and I will link her blog, which explains the campaign, in the chat after this introduction. The more who join, the better, and I hope everyone will check it out. Simone is a key organizer for an event on behalf of women in prison in Iran, featured in the 13th chapter. That night, play Judgment, British Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe, who's been the subject of a campaign that's garnered more than 3 million signatures. Despite this, she remains in prison. On the night of the reading, we all felt sure it was only a matter of months when she would be free, but of course, she's still trapped in Iran. On that night, we were lucky enough to hear poems written directly by Nazanin and other women imprisoned with her, and we joined with Amnesty in a letter writing campaign. This kind of activist collaboration is an important aspect of both EWI and the book we're launching. Sometimes reaching involves technology, especially giving when we need to give an extra helping hand. One such event was a reading featuring a group of young Afghanistani refugee women poets living in Athens who shared their work via video link. Another was an evening featuring young protest poets from Tahrir Square in Iraq, where our work was broadcast back to them into Baghdad. And both of these events feature in our book. This collaboration and activism give us hope. While many remain trapped and in danger, the voices of poets and protesters around the world show they're not taking the rise of authoritarianism silently, knowing that a free voice is a birthright. Tonight, of course, it's not possible to hear those poets who are featured in the book read their own work, but we are lucky enough to have British-Iranian poet Shirin Razavian join us. Shirin was born in Tehran and has been writing since the age of 9. She studied Persian and English literature, but had to flee Iran due to censorship, building a new life in London, where she has been published widely. Her poem, Romina, is in our chapter on violence against women. Shirin will first introduce and read from her own poetry, and Vashi wrote this poem she's going to read tonight in honor of Nazanin, and her husband Richard devoted his life to the campaign to free her. Thank you very much. Shirin, I'm going to pass over to you now.
Thank you, Catherine, for the lovely introduction. Hi, everybody. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Jennifer and the management of Exiled Writers Ink for keeping this organization going for 20 years and providing a platform for exiled and immigrant writers to produce and present and publish their work. I have been a member of EWI for the best part of 20 years, and it feels like my family, really. It's second family for me. Yeah, so I also I think congratulations are also in order to the editorial committee, whom I know they have been working relentlessly for months to pull together this fantastic anthology, Resistance. Congratulations to Camilla as well. So this anthology to mark the 20th anniversary of Exiled Writers Ink. So without further ado, I will read a couple of my poems. One is called Romina. So I have the pleasure of, and I'm honored to be included in this anthology, by the way. Thank you. So Romina is, this poem is about Romina Ashrafi, a 13-year-old Iranian girl who was sadly one of the most recent victims of honor killings in Iran. Romina is lying in a pool of crimson. A sickle has pierced her heart. Withered white wings of an angel, smeared with blood, as though she has been visited by the angel of death. The sickle glimmers in the moonlight as 13 years of innocent life drain away one by one. 13 doves fly away with blood-stained wings. Romina was a good student. Romina was a kind daughter. The sickle belongs to her father. The blood had to be shed to restore honor, to wipe away the shame she has bestowed upon her family. Romina's body is now purified to be honorably prayed for and buried. Romina's tears still glistening on her pale cheeks. Romina's honor is restored. Thank you. So the second poem I will read is Dying Young, and this was featured in a previous anthology also by Exiled Writers Ink called The Silver Throat of the Moon, which the title of the anthology is a verse from this poem of mine. My friends are all dead. The souls I used to write with, sing with, the songs of freedom on the mounts of Isfahan. Those familiar smiles, knowing sparkles in their eyes, souls who knew me, are now wandering at night, hovering over the blue mosques, brushing away the sound of azan from the navy sky of a suffocated town. The sounds which throttle the songs of freedom in our minds. And why would God play the devil's advocate? Was he not merciful? Was he not kind? Did he not whisper softly in my ears sweet lullabies of Irfan from the silver throat of the moon? Did he not gently stroke my hair through the kind hands of midnight breeze? Where did I leave him behind? Where did the devil hide my merciful? in the grave of some rotten corpse of ignorance and need, in the lethargy of decayed beliefs, or in the fire of lust and greed. My friends are dead, all beautiful and young, but through the silence of the night lives on the whisper of their song. Thank you. And now I introduce Mahvash Sabed Shahriari, is a Baha'i community leader and educator who was arrested in 2008 and released in 2017. Her prison poems were published in 2013, and she is a recipient of the Lou Ziabo Courage to Write Award and the Penn Pinter Prize, along with Michael Longley. Not seeing you. Not seeing you was enough. And all this torture, the dark and small cell, and the wall of stone, is for what? Not seeing you was enough. For the world to become a cage, and I, a lovebird alone. Breathless with a broken heart. For Richard from Nazanin. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Catherine and Shirin. And now we turn to Fatima Haji and Black Lives Matter with the poet Tessie Ora. Over to you, Fatima.
Thank you, Jennifer. I hope you can all hear me okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and people who identify as trans or non-binary. Thank you for joining us in this momentous book launch. I'm Fatima Haji, one of the editors of this truly wonderful anthology. The poems presented in the final chapter of the anthology reflect on the Black Lives Matter movement and all the different facets of widespread racism. They are not only an act of defiance, but a remembrance of those lives and cultures tragically lost to police brutality, imperialism, and racial inequality. In the poem, Ahmed Aubrey, by Shaka Campbell, he pays homage to the young man killed whilst jogging in the neighborhood in Georgia, the United States. We can see here that Black writers use their pen to immortalize the dead, so their names are more than hashtags in a fast-moving digital world, where it is so easy to forget and move on. In these poems, we are reminded that fighting for a different world is not only a worthy cause, but necessary to survival for people who identify as Black. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the talented poets Simone Yasmin, Shaka Campbell, Tessie Aura, and myself who contributed their powerful poems in this chapter. Thank you for trusting me to collectively curate our stories. I'm very proud of all of us. Now I'll hand over to Tessie Aura, who will read her poem, Genesis. Tessie, also known by her stage name, Socrates, is a high vibrational, vivacious and voluptuous poet. Her poetry is a riot, cloaked in humor, rhythms and alliteration, but is also a means to one end, the freedom to be woman and complex. So she writes about everything under the sun, except for romance, because she feels it's overdone. She believes in alchemy through creativity, so she likes to contribute to spaces in which art is used as a tool for entertainment, connection, and transformation. Her other interests include African politics and development, music and dance, and you can find her on social media platforms using @IamSocrates, and I will paste that in the chat below. Without further ado, take it away, Tessie.
Thank you, Fatima. I hope all of you can hear me. Well, hopefully. Yes, so thank you for that lovely introduction, Fatima. I never get tired of you reading that bio. Such a lovely voice. So I think Fatima pretty much introduced our chapter well. One of the things that I find all the artists really grapple with in the chapter is the identity of what it means to be Blackness and all the characterizations that kind of act as a code for us to be mistreated. And it's like looked at as very negative and kind of influences how we move around in the world, how we, things that we value, things that we fight for. And my poem, I wrote at a time where I was self-reading a lot about the history of Blackness. And I was surprised, well, not surprised, but I learned that, you know, the first humans, like up to, I think they calculated to almost like 200,000 years now, with a slight margin of error, emanates from what we know now as Africa. And I remember thinking, I was like, well, if Africa is a place and that's the source, then if Black was a place, Black would be the source. You know, it would be the origin. And I remember thinking, I was like, I mean, I remember for most of my period of school in history, all we learned about was pre-colonialism, just about Black.
Sorry, Tessie, we lost you there.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, you're back again, yes.
Oh, I am getting the little sign that my internet is unstable. Am I okay? Hello? You guys
Why
hear me?
don't you try and turn off the video? Maybe that will help.
Okay. Is it better now?
Yes, I can hear you clearly now.
Yeah.
Okay. Connection. I don't know what's happening. Okay. Oh no, you can't hear me?
I can hear you. We can hear you now.
Okay. Okay. Then I'll just start with the poem. Enough explaining. Hopefully the poem will speak for itself. The poem is titled Genesis, and here we go. She carries dead bodies on her head like a turban, more like a lasso wrapped around her head to balance what's left of our legacy. She holds her head up high skillfully, trekking for miles, back-breaking, exhausted, but still dripping with pride, because here she knows no other way. Here, she still has borders to feed and corruption to weed. Here, no one is going to ease the burden off her neck or her back without an interest rate attached. Here, the internet won't stop for her because in the race to develop, there's no time to grieve, no time to wait for apologies and condolences, but don't be fooled by her humility. She is the mother. She is the Genesis. Slit anybody's wrist and you will find traces of her. Evidence that more than once in a muddy hut in the presence of lions and elephants, she copped a squat. And at 11.7 million square miles dilated, greatness slid out of her thighs and into the palms of the savannah, dipped and baptized in the Nile. We were set free to roam the endless plains of the Serengeti. This is the connection.
I'm so sorry, we lost you there again.
Do you have the text, Fatima?
No.
Fatima, do you have the text
Yes,
to continue reading it?
Yes, yes, I can do that.
That's lucky.
Okay. She is the mother. She is the Genesis. Slit anybody's wrist and you will find traces of her. Evidence that more than once, in a muddy hut, in the presence of lions and elephants, she copped a squat, and at 11.7 million square miles dilated, greatness slid out of her thighs and into the palms of the savannah, dipped and baptized in the Nile. We were set free to roam the endless plains of the Serengeti. That is the truth I wish the history books would reconcile. Back then, there was no questioning the connection or the origins. The proof was in the melanin. The sun rose and set on it, and everything it touched. Her offspring controlled, and every time we leave to try and make fathers out of lands unknown. She permits the exodus, grudgingly yet secretly hoping for it, because the prodigal child always returns home with a greater love for it, with a deeper understanding and appreciation for the fabric of their identity, knowing that it is their lifeline, the umbilical cord that unquestionably links us all back to her. I'm sorry, I'm not reading it as well as Tessie, but maybe we'll record a video and release it at some point so you can all enjoy Tessie reading that poem.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tessie. Sorry about the connection.
Do we have the link to your poem? You're reading in the summer? You guys did a wonderful event together. Maybe we can link that here, and people who want to hear more of her voice can do that.
Yes, I've also put Tessie's social media handles in the chat, and I think we're gonna do a video of this and we'll release it.
Great.
Thank you, Fatima, for stepping in. And Tessie, we know that you're calling from far away over the ocean. Where are you based? Where are you living?
In between Kenya and the US.
Right. Okay. Lovely view there. Beautiful bow tie. Okay. Oh,
sorry about that. It's having all kinds of computer issues at the moment.
Oh, hi, Shaka.
Hello.
Shaka's poem was published in our chapter, the Black Lives Matter movement one. Lovely to see you.
Same here. I hope everyone's all right and staying safe.
Where are you living?
I'm in California at the moment.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
In San Francisco.
I see. And we could all write an amazing poem about the image behind you.
I've used it. I've used it in my workshops. It's an old show I went to.
Yes. Right. Camilla, do you wish me to do a little conclusion still? I think, right, okay. So I'll thank all the editors and the poets, Amir Darwish, Aziz Isa Elkun, Bogdan Tiganov, Denise Vargas Bolaños, Shirin Razavian, Tessie Ora, and Camilla would like me to just say a few words of conclusion, so bear with me while I reveal some words of wisdom about resistance. So the sort of dictionary definition is that it's commonly seen as the act or power of opposing a situation and is motivated above all by a desire for justice. Indeed, the call for revolution itself is heard in a couple of the poems in the book. So while the writing acts to defiantly contest iniquities that we've talked about, such as persecution, violence, oppression, injustice, and corruption, importantly, it also functions as witness to appalling deeds. And I can't remember who brought that up, but anyway, as such, it insists on the imperative of remembering, warning against amnesia, memory distortion, or denial often imposed by the ruling power. The writers are compelled to remember, to recall, and to share the truth in order to counter political distortions of history itself. And memory shows itself too in the refusal to allow collective history to be effaced. And nostalgia plays a role in maintaining the writer's idealized memory, which generates, hopefully, strength and the will to engage in the struggle of the homeland. Yet the poetics also function to challenge and unsettle deep-seated divides, be they religious, nationalistic, or ethnic. What struck me is that throughout the work, resilience prevails, in itself a refusal to be daunted. And my final words, finally, in all its 20 years of existence, Exiled Writers Ink. has stood for advocating human rights and tolerance through literature and literary activism. We stand in solidarity with the struggle for truth, humanity, and justice. And over to you, Camilla.
Hello, everyone. That was magnificent. Well done. I wanted to say, before I go on, a couple of things. First of all, there are two important links, at least two important links in the chat. Besides the book that you can buy, there is a link from Aziz Issa El-Kun to his work. So do have a look at the chat room for that. And there is a link there from Simone about a Yalda night event on the 21st of December. There are probably other things in the chat room which I don't want people to miss. She also provides a way of contributing with an amnesty link. I also wanted to say, somebody was saying, do we have an ebook version? Well, Jennifer and I haven't. I don't know if I can face that after today. We've been editing like crazy to catch up, but I think it's a good idea. There will be a recording of this event. It's running at the moment, and I will give the link to Jennifer and she can share it with all of you. I guess I just want to thank everybody for letting me be part of this, and I feel enormously honored. I've got to know some of you a little bit through your poems, and I wish Jennifer and all the editorial committee the very best in the important work that they do. That's kind of what I wanted to say. So thank you very, very much. We are going to end in a few moments. So I just wanted to suggest that people go down and look at the chat room, which is at the bottom of their screen, zip through it quickly and see if there are any links that you need to collect before you go. And we will be in touch very soon through Jennifer. And that was all, my dear. That's all that we've got here. It's been a magnificent evening, and we've had 60 people listening avidly to what's been going on, and I'm incredibly thrilled. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, let's unmute. I think most of you have now unmuted yourselves, but please feel free to do that, and then we can have a really good...
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Well done.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you. And happy anniversary.
Yeah, happy
anniversary.
anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Hi there.
Bye. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Oh, it's not fun.
No,